Hello, this is Matthew Randall, and in this talk, what I want to do is have a look at how we capture a 360-degree HDRI image and use that as an image-based lighting source in Maya to light up some visual effects elements. So I wanted to start off just by looking at a completed animation or a completed VFX sequence that I did. So this is our visual effects character here, and you can see that what we've done is we've used image-based lighting to light this character. So we've captured a HDRI in this space, and then we've used that HDRI to light this character. And the only lighting on this entire character is that HDRI image. Okay, and you can also see that we've also set it up to capture shadows, which we'll also talk about. Okay, I'll just run it through one more time so we can see it. So as I say, it's only lit up by that HDRI image. So let's start off by thinking about how we capture HDRI images, okay? So the first thing we want to think about is just remind ourselves that a HDRI image is a 360-degree image that is a high dynamic range image. What we mean by that is that the range of image intensity is actually greater than we could see on a monitor or with our eye. It actually goes beyond that range, and it's also beyond the range of what we can actually capture with a single exposure. So typically what we need to do is we need to do multiple exposures. Now, there are a number of ways of getting the 360-degree element. You could use a chrome ball, or you could use a panoramic lens and stitch it all together. The method that I used was to use a 360-degree camera, 360-degree camera. So the only thing you're really looking for, most 360-degree cameras have pretty good resolution and give you a pretty good image. The main thing you're looking for is the fact that you can do manual exposures with it. Okay, so what we used was a Ricoh Theta S camera. There might be an updated version of this now because we bought it a couple of years ago. But it does a really good job for us, and the main reason I went for this one is because you can manually control the exposures. That's really important because we can't do these multiple exposures, these bracketed exposures, to get the HDR, the high dynamic range image, with like a consumer 360-degree camera that just does an auto exposure. Okay, because an auto exposure is just always going to set things to the correct exposure. We need to be able to control that exposure manually. So that's really important. You need a 360-degree camera that has manual exposure in order to do this. Okay, so obviously, in terms of the high dynamic range part, what we're trying to do is capture bracketed images, so images at different exposures. So we want images that are overexposed and underexposed. Let me just show you an example of that. So let's get rid of that. Okay, so so you can see here, these are the images that I caught with the. I caught 6 images, and you can see I've got overexposed images to underexposed. Okay, so I'm manually setting my exposures up to get overexposed images and underexposed images. Great. Okay. The other great thing about the Theta S is there's an app you can download for it. I think it's free, or you might have to pay just a few pennies for it in Android. Okay, it might be like £1.50 or something like that. I can't remember. It wasn't an amount that caused me a problem. And it's called HDR for Theta S cameras. Okay, and basically this is like a remote control. The app's on you run the app on your Android, and it acts like a remote control for this camera. And what's really nice about it is you can just set all your exposures up. So you can say, here's the number of pictures I want to take. I can put this on a tripod. So this is what I did. I put it on a tripod, obviously, because I'm taking multiple exposures. I don't want the camera moving around. So I put this on a tripod, and I can set my exposures up on my phone, and then literally just press start and click away. Okay. Now, when I'm setting this up, I want to be able to control the exposure, right? And I guess the two ways you could control, the two real ways of controlling the exposure are via the ISO and the shutter speed. Now hopefully you can see here, if you look at the different exposures, I'm controlling it by the shutter speed. You can see here that my shutter speed is increasing as we go down here, and obviously what that means is that the shutter's open for a smaller amount of time and less light is hitting the sensor. And so obviously as we go down these pictures here, the pictures become more and more underexposed because there's less light hitting the sensor. Okay. I'm controlling exposure by just basically changing the shutter speed between each picture. Okay, I don't really want to do it through ISO because I think ISO is going to generate noise, and then you're trying to combine images that have different noise on them, and I think that's just going to cause you more problems. Okay, so I think you're better off controlling the exposure through shutter speed. That seems to be the best option to me. Okay. So that's how I did this, and then obviously what I'm doing is I set it to, obviously I want to set it to kind of ISO 100, which is kind of I think is its native ISO. So we've got the least amount of noise on it. And sorry, not looking at that. Sorry. Okay. So yeah. So this image here, what we're doing is what I'm doing is I'm going to figure out what I want my highest exposure to be, so my longest shutter speed to be effectively, and then I'm working out what I want my slowest shutter speed to be. Okay, and then I'm basically working out steps in between. Okay, so that's the key thing here. The nice thing about this app. And this is probably the way that the camera is set up anyway. So the nice thing about this app is that if you click on this drop-down menu for shutter speed, it gives you each step is a stop. Okay, because obviously I hope you realise obviously that the shutter speed, in order to kind of get an equal stop reduction in your exposure, the actual change in shutter speed is kind of exponential, if that kind of makes sense. It's kind of just over doubling each time for each of these exposures. So it's not like a linear. What I'm saying, it's not like a linear number change. Okay, but you don't need to worry about that because all those stops are taken care of for you with this drop-down menu. So so obviously I work out my longest shutter speed, I work out my shortest shutter speed, and then obviously, and what I did was just, if you go on the drop down menu, I just count how many steps there are between those two extremes, and then I kind of work out how many images I want between those steps. You don't need to take an image on every step, that would be ridiculous. So for example, if I go on this drop down menu and there was like 20 steps between my big my highest exposure and my lowest exposure, then I might say, hey, I'm going to do 5 images with 4 steps in between, or 10 images with 2 steps between each one. That's entirely up to you. So that's how I kind of figure out what exposures I'm going to take. Okay. Now, the only other thing I would kind of point out here is actually with most of these, I was a little bit inconsistent with the way I set my white balance up, but I basically set them all up on auto. And I think for most situations, if you're indoors, for example, that shouldn't be a problem. The only thing to be aware of is if you're outside and it's like a cloudy day, you've got clouds kind of coming in and blocking the sun, or the sun being revealed, then obviously the thing to be aware of is that if in between these shots the sun suddenly gets covered up, then the white balance will kick in. The white balance will kick in and change things, but I guess it will kind of screw up other things in terms of the exposure anyway. But that's just something to be aware of. So I did use auto white balance, and that seemed to work fine. Just but obviously just be aware of the sun gets covered up between shots. The white balance will kick in and will change between your images. Okay, so I think that kind of explains how the camera I use and how I set that up and used it, and obviously I'm not going to go through the app now, but it's fairly straightforward to use, and it worked really well for me. Okay, Next thing, and obviously I've got to put it on a tripod. That's really, really important, okay? But you don't need a particularly heavyweight tripod to do it, because obviously the camera's quite small. Okay, so back to these images. So what I want to do now is I've got these images off my camera, and what I want to do is combine these into a high dynamic range image. Okay, so I'm going to do that through Photoshop. There might be other tools that you could use, but I'm going to do it through Photoshop. Okay, and I'm just going to go File, Automate, and I'm going to go Merge to HDR. Okay, so I'm going to click on that. It will bring up this menu, and you can just browse to where your images are. In fact, I'm trying to remember where they are. Okay, I've got the folder now. Should be a little bit more organized than that. There we are. So I've selected all these images and I click OK. It'll load them in. I just click OK and it will start combining them down. Again, as I said, I took 6 images. That's not a hard and fast rule. You can take whatever number of images you want. Okay. And also, if you look at the images that I did take as well, just having a look at this, you could argue that I could have possibly gone higher up in the exposure or a little bit lower down. I think definitely lower down, because you can see that this is still kind of overexposed, and this is still kind of overexposed as well. So I could have actually pushed the brackets even further if I wanted to as well. Okay. Let's go back to Photoshop. So once it's processed that, you'll get this kind of menu here. Now we've got kind of 2 options that we can use. Okay, so the main thing you want to do is you want to move it into 32-bit mode. Okay, and then you've got an option of whether you go toning in Adobe Camera Raw or not. Okay, and basically the difference is or complete toning in Camera Raw, and basically the difference is that if you select that, it will allow you to kind of adjust the white balance and adjust the kind of central exposure of the image. You wouldn't want to fiddle with anything else, because that's going to start messing around with the image. So if you start kind of making, like, I don't know, the shadow areas darker and the lighter areas lighter, it's just gonna you're just messing with the dynamic range of it. Then you want to keep everything as flat and as neutral as possible. Okay, great. So you can do that, but that will reduce it to a 16-bit image. Okay, and as much as possible I want to keep this to a 32-bit image, so I'm going to turn this off. Okay, in fact I'm just going to keep it turned on just so I can just show you what happens. So if I click on here, I'll just show you both workflows basically. So we're just letting it load up here. Okay, and so as I said, it allows you to kind of adjust the color temperature. So you could get your background plate in here and you can kind of go, oh, actually, yeah, this could do being a bit warmer. So you can kind of match this to your background plate a little bit better. And then you can adjust the exposure. But as I say, you don't want to fiddle with any of these. Okay, now if I click OK, and I just go into mode, you'll see that it's turned it into a 16-bit per channel image. And really I wanted it as a 32-bit channel. So that's just a compromise you make for doing that workflow. If I do the other workflow, so I'm just going to go back to Automate, Merge. Here I am just browsing the files again. Let's select those files, click OK, and go OK. Just go through that process again, and this time what I'm going to do is I'm just going to turn off the option to tone the image first. Okay, and then what we should end up with is a 32-bit image. Okay, I'm just going to pause it while it's doing that. Okay, so it's brought up this menu for us, just like we had before. So again, 32-bit mode, but this time I'm just going to turn off this and turn that checker off. So that means we can't do anything with the image. It's just going to take what we've got and bake it into a HDR for us. Okay. Just wait for it to do that process. So it's obviously a quicker process. And then if I go into image mode, you'll see that this is now a 32-bit image. Okay, and obviously we want that bit range. That bit range is really kind of telling us yeah, that bit range is what's going to make this work as a light source. Okay, great. So now what I want to do is save this image. Oh, sorry. One of the things to point out as well is you may have spotted in here that we do have our like tripod legs in here. Okay. So that is just a sort of unfortunate side effect of this. Maybe I could put my tripod legs in a little bit more and they wouldn't be so much into the image. So yeah. Or maybe another option might be to use a light stand, but instead, my only worry about a light stand is I think the wind, because it is a very light camera, so the weight's fine, but my concern is the wind might just move the camera around a bit. But certainly if you're indoors or it's on a very still day, you might get away with a light stand, and so you're less likely to have this sort of problem of the tripod legs kind of coming into the image. But again, what we can do is we can just use our Photoshop tools to do that. So we've got our kind of clone stamp here. I can just click Alt here and then kind of start cloning it, if that kind of makes sense. Okay. This is obviously a rubbish attempt at cloning, but you get the idea. You can do that. My quick and dirty solution to this is literally to kind of grab this bit of the image here and just literally delete that. Okay. And actually, it's giving you an option with the content aware fill. Let's see what happens with that. Give that a moment and see if the content aware fill does anything useful. No. Okay, so what we'll do is we will delete it again, and I don't want any content aware fill. I'll just say, hey, just bung in the background color. Boom. Okay, slightly odd background color, but anyway, we'll go with that. And then what you can do is you could just grab. So I'm just going to grab, say, this bit of the image here, and I'm just going to go Control T. Again, this isn't really a Photoshop tutorial. And then just scale this bit of the image. Oh, hang on. I don't want to scale it like that. I'm going to hold Shift, scale this image, and just cover up this bit here, okay? This is a really clunky way of doing it, but this is how I'm going to fix it for the moment. Again, it's about what we'll do. You know, it's at the end of the day, we're using this to light the object. We're not using this to, if we really needed, if we had a very reflective character and we needed our reflections to be really spot on, then I might spend more time on this to get this better. But I think for our purposes and for what the image requires, this will be fine, and we wouldn't notice we wouldn't notice any improvement with other techniques that take longer. So if I just go deselect, hang on, I just need to go enter. There we are. And let's do deselect that. So there you are. So you can kind of see, yeah, it's kind of warped it a little bit. And there are also other kind of like distortion tools and warping tools that you could use that might give a better result. But that's kind of my quick way of kind of fixing that, and it covers the area with something that is similar to what would have been there. Okay, I think that is a better option than actually kind of cropping the whole image. I think if you crop the whole image, it means that it means that you're not going to get the kind of distribution of where things are is going to be all warped, if that kind of makes sense. If you crop the image, then what's going to happen is this building and everything's going to be kind of shifted down and made larger than it was in real life. I hope that kind of makes sense. So I'd rather not just scale the image. I'd rather keep it the same size and then just fill it with content that is kind of very similar to what would have been there. Okay, so I'm happy with that. I'm going to go File, Save As. And what you'll notice is that our traditional kind of crappy JPEG format is not there because that won't cope with a 32-bit image. So what we've got is we've got our basically I would plumb for either HDR Radiance or EXR. I'm going to go for HDR. Okay, I'm going to click on that and go Save. In fact, where did I save that? This time I'm going to save it somewhere sensible. Let's go and save it somewhere sensible and give it a name, shall we? Rather than just click save. Okay, so I'm going to go to... I'm actually going to navigate to the Maya project that I want to use this in. Okay, so just give me a moment. Okay. So it's in this Maya project. I'm going to put it into the source images folder of my Maya project here, and I'm just going to call it Garden 2. There we are. Okay, Garden version 2. Okay, save that. Brilliant. Okay, so basically what you'll see is I've put it inside my Maya project here. So I've got various kind of scene files in here, but I've put it in the source images, and there it is, Garden version 2, so that we can use it. Okay, let's skip over to my Maya project now. Okay, so here we've got a Maya project. This is the Maya project for this video. Okay, great for this video, and you can see in the Maya project we've got our character, our animated character, doing its thing. Okay, one of the things I've set up already in this project is a camera that replicates. So we've got this camera here. This camera here is already being aligned in terms of its field of view and its position and orientation and all the other bits to replicate the camera that we actually shot our background plate with. Okay, so we've already set that bit up, and then this is just replicating the ground where the ground would be as well. Okay, just to demonstrate that, let's go. If I go perspective, let's look through the camera. Here we are. We can look through the camera, and we can also, if I go view, select camera, so that we can see the camera attributes. We also have a background image on there as well. So I'm going to click on that. So we've also got a background image that's been applied to this, so you can actually see that it's all lined up. I've got it turned off at the moment, but you can see that this is all lined up. I've also set up my display layers here, so I can just turn the ground off and I can kind of see how that's all kind of coming together. So you can kind of see I've got it all set up, ready to kind of put things together. Great. Okay, and I don't want to cover that in this tutorial. We're just focusing on setting up the light. Okay, so let's go back into our perspective view. Okay, what I'm going to do is I'm going to go and create a sky dome light. So I'm going to go Arnold, lights, sky dome light. Let's click on that. And if I click on my, so I've got it selected now. You can see this is the sky dome light here. It is quite large. You could make it a bit smaller. That's fine. I haven't had a need to resize it, but it is a little bit large the way it brings it in. Yeah. Okay, so I'm going to click on the attribute editor because I want the attributes of this sky dome light. And the key thing is we want to apply our HDR image to this color attribute here. Okay, so I'm going to click on this. Click file, then I'm going to click on image name, and we just wait for Maya to bring up the file menu. Okay, my Maya is incredibly slow at bringing up the any file menu. So if anyone knows how to solve that, well, let me know. I've got it all, you know, the project set and all of this, but it still seems very slow. So yeah, anyone's got any ideas, let me know in the comments. Right, okay. So it was Garden version 2, wasn't it, that we were working with? So let's bring that one in. So we're just going to go open. Okay, so here it is. And what we can do is we can let's do a render now with this light. Okay, so I'm just going to go render in Arnold. And what you can see is it is lighting up the camera, lighting up the character. You can see it's lighting up the character, and we're getting our reflections. And this is all, it's already kind of looking authentic. But what I want to do is really kind of check it against the background plate. And actually, what we're seeing in the background right now is actually the sky dome. So one of the things you want to do straight away, there's a couple of things you want to do straight away with this sky dome light. Okay, and I'll tell you what I'm going to do. I'm just going to modify my render settings just to make the render a little bit smaller so that we can kind of see what's happening a bit more. So in common, don't know why I've forgotten where to set this. I'm going to just put it down to that. I think that should be fine. Yeah, let's do that. Okay. Okay. Here's our render. I'm just going to reduce the size of our render window a bit here. That should do something like that. Okay, so I'm going to click on the sky dome light here. So we've got our sky dome attributes here, and what I want to do is, I've got my kind of settings quite low as well. So you'll see that my I'm trying to remember what the defaults are, but I've turned them down reasonably low so I can get I can preview stuff in this render window fairly quickly. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I want this to light up my character, but I don't want to actually see it in the render itself. Okay, so we can do that by adjusting this camera visibility. So what we can do is turn that off, and what you'll see is the sky dome kind of disappears. That's really great. Okay, the other thing as well is you often get quite a lot of noise. Now obviously there's a lot of noise on this render due to the fact that I've turned down my samples down quite low on all my render settings. But also what you will find is that you will get a certain amount of noise from this skylight from the default settings. What you want to do, I always just tend to turn the samples up here to 3. Okay, and again, there'll still be a bit of noise, but that's really going to be coming from the other kind of sample settings in our render settings, which we can kind of boost up when we come to do our render. Okay, but you can see that just pushing that up to 3 has increased the quality of it as well. Notice I have got motion blur switched on my camera as well, so I'm actually rendering the motion blur in Arnold rather than trying to do it in the comp. Okay, it's just my kind of preferred workflow there. Okay, so great. So yeah, turn the samples up, and obviously turn the camera visibility off is the key thing to do here. Right, okay. Now, what we want to do is, I want to see this against our background plate. And for whatever reason, Arnold doesn't actually kind of, even though we've got a background plate here, if I go into, switch to my camera perspective, we've got a background plate there. It's not actually rendering, okay? So that's easily fixed. What we can do is we can just go in here and we say, hey, I want you to use in the background here. Oh, so if you don't see this, go into, hang on, yeah, just click on this cog here and you'll see these settings, okay? Sometimes I forget I have these windows already open and they're not always open by default. So, yeah, I'm going to click on this and say, hey, I want to use an image as a background, and then I'm just going to go to the same image that I'm using as my on our image plane that's attached to our camera there. I'm just going to load that in to here. I'm going to click open. Great, and it looks kind of, the image is kind of overexposed because it's applying some color management to it, and I haven't really looked into all the color management stuff in Maya and what you need to do to tweak that, but really what I do is just switch it off and just say I don't want any color management, and that seems to give me the kind of correct color for that image. Okay, now what this allows me to do is obviously straight away I can see what the exposure is like, of our or the intensity is like, sorry, of our light in terms of exposing this character so that it looks like it's integrated into this shot. So at the moment this character looks, it's not being lit enough. Does that make sense? To kind of integrate into this shot. Okay, so what we can do is say, again, I've got my sky dome light is still selected. That's the attributes that I'm looking at here. I can just go in here and I can just kind of adjust the exposure. So I can just whack it up to 2, and you can see straight away I'm getting much better results. Okay, I'm getting an exposure that looks much more kind of integrated here. Again, I'm going to go for I think that feels like it. I might just push it a bit higher, see if that looks a bit better. Yeah, I'm going to stick with that. Okay, so that's kind of my exposure setup. Again, I can see that, the way that this is lighting up our object, especially if we look at this visor here, okay, I'm getting really nice reflections. It's giving me the detail I need. Again, I don't feel I need a HDRI that's any more detailed than this. So this is giving me some nice results. Okay. So now what I want to do is I want to put some shadows. I want to put some shadows here. Okay. So the way that we do that, I'm going to turn off my render. We need to turn back on our floor. Okay. Ground here. And if I go to my render, this is just a normal Lambert. At the moment, the floor's just got a normal Lambert shader applied to it. Okay. As you can see, there we go. Okay, and what we want is we want to kind of pick up these shadows, okay? But obviously we don't want the actual, our shader to have any kind of diffuse color of its own. We just want the shader to pick up the shadows, okay? Now, Arnold have already thought of this, okay? So what we can do is, and we have a special shader in there. So what we can do is we will select the ground. I'm just going to go right click. I'm going to go, assign new material. It's an Arnold shader, and we're going to use the AI shadow matte shader, this one here. Okay, let's click on that. And I'm just going to accept the defaults. Okay, we can look at the material in more detail, but I'm just going to go with the defaults, and let's just do a render. And you can see that that shadow matte material is doing exactly what we want it to do. Okay, it's giving us, the kind of reflections there, and everything that we want. Okay, in our render. Okay, one thing just to note, you'll kind of see that you've got these kind of weird white edges on this image here, and what we've done here is we've actually undistorted this image before bringing it in to Maya, because trying to match up like 3D objects to a distorted image is kind of really tricky and something that we want to avoid. So I've basically so it's basically this background plate is an undistorted version of it. Again, I'm not going to go into how to undistort a plate. That's another tutorial. Okay, but with just be aware that this background image that we're using here is undistorted. Okay, so yeah, I hope you enjoyed that, and that's giving you an idea of how to use our HDRI lights. I think the only thing I've really not actually touched on, just thinking about it, is one of the things to kind of think about actually is I'm going to select our sky dome light. I'm just going to turn the camera back on. Okay, this is probably one of the first steps you should do. I kind of missed this step, so I do apologize for this. Okay, so if I click my render back on, hopefully I can kind of see it in the background. Great, there we are. I might just turn off my background image for the moment. So just go background color, which I think is, yeah, okay. One of the things I might want to do is just rotate this sky dome light. Okay, so I'm going to just go into, I think I'm just going to go into the perspective view here. Sorry, just trying to move things around a little bit. Ooh, here we go. Select this light. I'm hoping to find a, yeah, here are a rotational controller. So what I want to do is, again, looking at the background plate, I'm just going to look at it in here, but obviously just thinking about what should be in the background here, what we want to do is just rotate our HDRI image just so that it's kind of orientated correctly. You should only really need to rotate it on this axis, so around the y-axis. All I'm just going to do is just rotate this. You kind of have to have it with the render on just to kind of give you the right view. Okay, obviously, the whole kind of perspective thing's a little bit skewed, etc. So we're not going to be able to lay it out 100% accurately, but I think that will do. I might just shift it back a little bit. Okay, so that is, sorry, I do apologise. That is an important step that I forgot. Okay, but we're getting pretty good results out of it anyway, weren't we? Okay, so now I'm going to obviously just turn this back off so we can't see it in the camera. And then obviously turn our image back on, background image back on, and there we are. It's all kind of integrated again. There we go. So hopefully kind of you're looking at that, and I'm quite happy with the results of that. I can see that once I boost these render settings up, I'm going to get a render that's going to fit into this image really nicely. Okay, and as I say, it's only lit by that one HDRI light source that we captured. Okay, thank you for watching.